So welcome, Armchair Pundits, Katherine White and Fennell Norton. We're excited to be back. It was so great to watch you last week when you went live all by yourself.
I was a bit terrified and I almost chickened out, but I
I got
persevered.
that
But I
chicken
can
call
tell you,
around 6 p.m. I think you gave me a chicken
I
call.
did, I did. I said, call me ASAP.
And I was busy. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm so glad I didn't answer.
Yeah.
Right?
If you had answered, there would probably be something else going on at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, you'd
It
be like,
would not have been me.
yeah, yeah, no doubt. Yeah, so today there's so much when we had the show on Friday. I don't know if people tuned in on Friday to watch, but we had Lauren Burke on, which was great, and talk about Black media and power. We were talking about the Yes campaign, and we're always trying to figure out where we're going in this. I don't know. Feels like crazy journey in life every day. Democracy. It seems like our country is, just really kind of unraveling, and we're trying to follow the thread. And tonight, I like to follow the thread a little bit with you about kind of what you're thinking about and seeing. And I know we kind of set this show up tonight, sort of around the SAVE Act, because one, I think talking about connecting the dots that maybe we see, and then how we can sort of try to weave our sweater back together a little bit.
Hmm.
So, so I want to start with you, and talking about sort of what's on your mind about where we're going when we talk about the SAVE Act and maybe back in history with stuff like Jim Crow.
Yeah, I don't think it's, and I love that this is really our opinion about how we think about things. And I love the notion that we're just regular people thinking about things the way that people think about things and not the way necessarily that politicians or real pundits think about things. But when we're talking about the SAVE Act, you and I were having a conversation last week, and you were telling me about a story that you read when you were young, and the story was called The Lottery. And it was so interesting that after you told me that, I went to look it up to find out more about the story written by Shirley Jackson. And the story is called The Lottery, and it was written in 1948. And so it's interesting that you got to read that when were you in high school when you read that story?
I want to say I was younger than that. My mom was a big reader, and I'd always find her in the room with one arm back over, her head and a book laying on her face when she'd fall asleep. But so I got introduced to like probably inappropriate literature, probably pretty early. But that book stuck with me, The Lottery. And I don't know if anybody in here has read The Lottery, but it really was chilling. Yeah, I was probably
Yeah.
in fourth or fifth grade or something, probably when I read it.
Yeah, and so let me tell you how it started for those who might not be familiar with it. It was actually a work of fiction written by Shirley Jackson in 1948 for The New Yorker. It's been printed many, many times over, but it was written by her, a work of fiction. When she wrote that story, she actually says her mother and father said, "Dad and I don't like the story that you wrote." And there were so many people who wrote into The New Yorker. Some of them canceled their subscriptions to The New Yorker for this. I think that people would be really interested to know when you read the book
Right.
what it was about and why people have responded so harshly back then and how it correlates to today.
Yeah, I mean, when we were talking about it, one thing, well, all the stuff we've been talking about with what's happening to people with Minnesota and all the, real cruel, horrible things that people seem to be willing to do when it comes down to sort of wanting to win this election, wanting to have this president, like when does it stop? Like where does the cruelty stop? And we've talked about this before, for instance, when Jay Jones was running for attorney general and some things came up and we had to explain to people why it was so important to vote for him. Now, his texts were about Republicans kind of ignoring the slaughter of children, and what he said, and people didn't really want to face it. It's only when people have something horrible happen to them, especially sort of these MAGA-minded cultists or people that don't have a great, more operate around fear. Um, that they only change when something happens to them. So when I thought about all the stuff I'm seeing and I'm trying to talk to people, and you and I always try, like, how do we get through to people? I don't know why we care so much about getting through to people, but we know it's the key to making a change. We really do. But that story, The Lottery, showed me that here is this town that kind of decided that it came up with this idea about how it would punish people. And so you would like, you probably have read it and refreshed your memory, but it comes down to they all agreed with this kind of horrific way to take care of problems. And so you would pull a number, and then, all day you'd almost make a like a birthday party, gather rocks to go out, and you're going to really go and freaking stone somebody. And, it's in people's mind, they justify it. And then till it happens to the mother who realizes that, her daughter's number is called and that they have to stone her, or maybe it was the mother, but it was
Yeah,
the idea that, this whole stuff that you're setting up, this whole society where you're breaking down America's beauty, and that when they come for you and you have to, the stones you're gathering are going to be aimed at your family. And I just felt like, that story, 1948, is really relevant today. And can we help people understand that the stones they're gathering are going to come for them? The SAVE Act, all the dots that we want to connect tonight are coming for you. And will you throw that stone at are you ready for this? So go,
yeah.
go with me.
Yes. Yeah, so I wanted to tell you, you're exactly right. So they believe that and other towns used to do this according to the story, but they all decided to stop it. But
Yeah.
this one town believed that their harvest was gonna be so much better if they continued with this ritual of the lottery. And folks are really excited about it, and the children, like you said, are gathering the stones, and they're just everybody's excited and this one lady, she's really excited, and she's all into it until when they pull out they have this box that they put everybody's information in until they pull out her name. And then it's all of these reasons why it's not fair, that it's wrong. They didn't put the right name in it. It's written the wrong way, and someone else did it. And to your point,
Right.
it is exactly what we're thinking about today when it comes to reproductive rights, when it comes to voting. Everything is okay until it's you. And in this ritual, so I want people to know
Yeah.
that act as they do this, they actually stone the person to death, and that's why the story is so horrifying about the cruelty of people until it happens to them. And Catherine, you were talking about the SAVE Act, but in this, when people think about it, it can be tied to different things. Think
Right.
about this. Think about the draft. So
Uh-huh.
think about the draft. During the draft, 10 million young men, 18 to 25, were drafted. Not because they wanted to go in, but they were drafted.
Right.
You know how many died? 400,000 died.
Wow.
So when
Yep.
you think about the lottery and this whole idea about, this thing that happens to you and you're selected whether you want it to or not,
Right.
the voting rights, the SAVE Act, which people think that it won't affect them, but we know the SAVE Act will disenfranchise millions upon millions of women. It will disenfranchise rural people to degrees that we can't imagine. It will disenfranchise, anybody who moves and you need to get a new ID, women who've had their name changed. So I think I'll give it back to you, but
Yep.
this
No,
is what
no.
this is all about.
No, I know. And it's funny when you go back and like you said, and what I didn't know is that book, is that how the bad review and people, what did you say that it was banned or something? Like the story with people were, what happened again?
Well, they didn't it could be a banned book now,
Yeah,
who
who knows?
knows, but
Story at
back
least.
then they didn't ban it, but they she carried home, you know, uh, little stacks of letters every week that they would send to her for people writing back, and as I said, some of them canceled their subscriptions with The New Yorker. They were just angry, but many people were just interested, more interested. They wanted to know more about the story. They wanted to hear more about it. And I think that says something about how we have to talk to people
Yeah.
today about the things that are happening and just being able to make things visible so people understand it. You were talking about a neighbor who has to put her mother into a nursing home
Right.
and
Right.
she's going to change her address. And when she changes her address, should the say that pass, would she be able to get a passport? Would she be able to get all the things
Right.
she needs in order to be able to vote?
No, and so I think with the, one thing about this whole, so when I say connect the dots, and one thing that really when I was listening to Mark Elias, Democracy Docket, you can go down so many rabbit holes. But one thing what I wanted to bring up about the SAVE Act and this idea, with the lottery, how we're just connecting the dots to a lot of ways that how this kind of evil is supported or bad ideas are supported because people don't really think down the road that it's going to impact them, and I think even um, when this is even brought up to people, they don't believe it, anyways. But he was really kind of warning around not only the SAVE Act, the other one is the MEGA Act, which is Make Elections Great Again. And as they say, the SAVE Act, I want people to think about as one big lever, proof of citizenship at registration for federal elections. They want to pull that one big lever. The MEGA Act is like a toolbox of bad stuff. You require photo ID. It bans ranked choice voting, abolishes, universal vote by mail, requires bail absentee, ballots for federal office be received by poll close on election day. And it really is it's just the big toolbox to shut it all down. Because in the end, when we talk about how we're going to stop things from really cruelty happening, getting control back, they're obviously thinking of every kind of tool in their toolbox to use. Because even in other countries like, Hungary and all that, you still will have elections. It's just that what we're fighting for is fair and free elections, right? Um, so I just want to say that it's really important because this is going to come up for the midterms. It really will determine power. It will determine if we are going to start to really fight back to make or get our country back. And so the answer for this, I don't know, on so many levels kind of confounds me how we're going to tackle all of this. Sometimes I'm like, so I think we have to sort of put the cruelty up there when we talk about things like the lottery, is that have the opportunity to really talk to people because people are misinformed. And for instance, I'm walking with a friend and we were talking about the SAVE Act, and she said to me, and she's a reliable Democrat, she really just not paying attention. We went for a little walk. She's like, well, what's the problem with showing voter ID? She really was just like, I don't see that. What's the problem? She really wanted to know because that's all she thought that was. And then, so I think our job in describing what is really happening is it's going to be difficult because it's not just voter ID. The SAVE Act is deeper than that, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say that our congresswoman, Republican congresswoman, they're actually going on
mhm.
defense already. They're or is it offense? I'm not a football person. They're going on offense already
Yeah,
about it, and she's talking about why the SAVE Act is so important to preserve voting. And then I listened to, Kristi Noem on TV, and she was somewhere, and she had a slide, and she had a big thing up that said, "84% of people believe that you should have a photo ID, and what we're saying, blah, 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 blah." So the way that they're talking about it, getting
right.
on offense already to say, "Everybody, this makes sense to everybody." And to your point, our job is to show that that is not what they're doing. That
No,
is not the kind of photo ID that they're asking for. The photo ID that people believe we should have, most people have it already.
ready.
And so that's not what they're talking about. It will be our job, to your point, to be really clear
Right.
and show examples where everyday people who are voting today would lose the opportunity to vote should this act pass.
Yes. So, I want people in this, listening in to remember when we harken back to Jim Crow to understand. We remember when they put that stuff into the law, it was the same kind of integrity language, right? They wanted to make sure that real people were voting, Americans are voting, and so they make up this idea that this has to happen. And I want to remind everybody in this room, every Republican in the House voted for it. There's not one good one of them that will stand up and actually talk about what's in the bill, because it's not just about photo ID. Because, like you said, it's already an issue. Well, what else is in the bill? Deep in the bill are all kind of things about how people can vote in nursing homes, for instance, who can actually legitimately say who you are, what kind of ID is really acceptable. And so it just really will disenfranchise, not just Democrats, but Republicans. And this is when we go back to like, they'll start caring when they can't really care anymore and vote. when they really start to be realizing this is coming for them too, or shutting down the world that can be better, for instance, but what's deep inside the bill that's not being talked about. That's why stories like my friend who said, hey, listen, everybody, my mom is in a nursing home now and assisted living, and she's 90. She doesn't drive, and she's been a reliable voter. And guess what that SAVE Act will do to her? She will, you can't register somebody in the street. You can't register somebody at the library. This is what people aren't talking about. How she'll be thrown off the rolls. And then how do you register your mom that's 90? Oh, she can't, you can't just fill it out at the nursing home. She has to go down a half an hour to drive to the DMV. And guess what she needs? A passport. Well, she doesn't have one. Well, where's a birth certificate? Well, guess what? She doesn't have that either. She is, because this is about citizenship. And we have never in America have a voter ID system that's about citizenship. It's just other countries may have a national citizenship thing. We do not. Do you walk around with your papers in your pocket for now?
No, I don't.
So ask a Republican friend, like when they tell this to you here, you just say, hey, well, what's the matter with photo ID? You say to them, well, prove to me you're an American right now. Prove to me you're an American. And then, they're going to be like, well, what do you mean? Like, well, they'll show you their ID. Well, that doesn't prove you're an American. Show me you're American. So, I just feel like what we have to do is kind of get into those details. And the integrity language is what that they use. Well, we have to. Then what other people don't realize is they'll play with, when we say connect the dots, that's to the post office, to this stuff about postmark acceptance, how it could be accepted. And guess who's controlling the elections now? Crazy people, election deniers. So what can they say now? Well, your mom didn't fill out the ballot correctly. And they can say, sorry, you can't vote. So this will be used targeted using the Palantir kind of software ideas, using AI technology to target mostly blue states, mostly Democrats. They can, micro target. So I know we're off on a tangent, but it's really, it's really the SAVE Act connecting the dots is bigger than just showing ID.
Yeah, it really is, and I know some folks have just joined in, and so I wanna just sort of back up a
Go
little
ahead.
bit and tell them what we've been talking about, and that is this really interesting book that Katherine read when she was younger. It's called The Lottery. It was written by Shirley Jackson in 1948. It's a really interesting read. I'm gonna encourage everyone to go. You can Google it, you can find information on it, and you're gonna be able to connect the dots for yourself about how it relates to the SAVE Act, how it relates to the draft, which, by the way, the draft thing really sorta is in Project
Like,
2025.
oh, really?
It yeah, so I'm gonna go off on a tangent and tell you a really quick
Right.
story. So you know how often we all talked about Project 2025 when
Right.
the election was happening and people just, some people just blew it off.
Right.
Well, someone sent me a note and said, "Hey, someone told me that the draft would be coming back into effect." And I said, It's in Project 2025." So I went and looked it up, and here's what it says, that anybody who goes to public school, so this is not private school,
Okay.
but public school would be required to test to go into the military. Now, just think about that for a minute. Public school, so we're not talking about private school, we're talking about any kids who go to public schools that they would need to test and then see about their eligibility to go into the military. It's in Project 2025. I don't know if this happened yet,
Yeah.
but that is there. And so all of these things that we are talking about, all of the things that we fear are in Project 2025. It's policy that they are really trying to implement. And this SAVE Act is really no different from that. If you just think about the white Christian
Right.
nationalism that's embedded inside of Project 2025, what have they said? That we should repeal the 19th Amendment.
Oops.
So connecting the dots, this is all there, it's all real, you can
Right.
find it, but I'm gonna tell you guys to go and pick up the lottery, and you'll be able to just find some interesting connections
Yeah.
to what
Well,
we're
now
talking
you
about.
brought up what I really want to kind of end in because we were talking about the contrarian had an article I shared with you.
Mhm.
We're talking about, tying in how we're really trying to talk to people, trying to figure out what is the level that certain people are willing to accept, that threshold? We're trying to find that threshold where we'll wake people up, and we're saying some that these people, like I will just say, just Republicans are kind of built to sort of be only empathetic about the people in their life until it really hits home do they seem to change. So what is that threshold, right? And the threshold where we have to call attention, where you talked about looking in the mirror and people having to really own up to who they really are, is that when we talked about the incident when Trump posted the racist images of the Obamas. And then all of a sudden, these people coming out of the woodwork, these, the Christians, let's call them whatever, saying some of these Republicans, some never Trumpers, whoever they are that support Trump or voted for him, or still kind of support him, we're appalled all of a sudden. Well, where were they before? So I'd like to talk about that. And I think the contrarian article said, uh, do we have to always hear from Black people that have been oppressed by this, to their point of view? When do we hold the white folks accountable, these people in Christian churches accountable, and let them talk about the tolerance for this, and why all of a sudden are you, where are you on supporting this president and these policies? Right? Like, let's hold the mirror up to them again when we've talked about this before.
Yeah, I think, I think it's really interesting that we have always tried to find off ramps for people so that they can easily say that the
Right.
decision that I made was a bad decision. So we can't make them feel too bad about it. So we
Yeah,
give them an off ramp.
right,
And I'm really of the mind that no, we need to bring visibility and clarity to what you are signing up for.
right,
And yes, it is up to people um, to actually start to ask the questions and start to be the ones to come out and talk about the harm that they are causing. But
right,
I guess I'm losing confidence in the majority of people.
right,
This is the way that I think about it, and I'm trying to think who was it. Maybe it was Steve Phillips in the color Democracy in Color,
right,
when we realized that well, when I realized that Lincoln didn't really win with the majority, it was 3 people who ran in that presidential election, and because it was 3, he won. The other 2 were really people who supported slavery. I say that to say that this is where you have to really build a coalition. I'm not sure that we're ever going to get a majority of white Americans who believe in a multicultural society, a country.
mhm,
I think it is going to be this white people who are kind and human and who believe that people should have rights and who
right,
believe that there isn't a race that is better than the other, that is superior. But I think that is why that article is there, and that is why the struggle is there, because until we have more people who are the majority speak up about what is happening and talk to people to their faces about who they are and what they're supporting, I'm not sure that we're ever going to have the conversation that we really need to have, that is the underpinning of all that ails us in this country, which is race.
right.
I don't know if I answered your question, but
No,
that's where
but,
I am.
it's always back to that pinnacle conversation. When I was at the Chinese New Year celebration, I talked to a young man. He was 21, uh, graduated from the high school up the street, just coming back for the Chinese New Year celebration, obviously a tradition. And he stood at our table. We had the Say Yes campaign table and everything.
Mhm,
And we were talking to voters and trying to interact, because really this is what you need to do. But I noticed this young man, because he stopped at our table and he stood and looked, and he had this tattoo up and down his arm, and he was built, and we started to talk, and he said, I want to understand what attracts you to be a Democrat. I really want to understand. He said, because you can tell he was having some really deep conflict. And he said he voted for Trump, and he voted for him because he felt like he was strong and there wasn't going to be any wars. He realized he was foolish now, because some of it, like the YouTube stuff he was following. So that's really powerful for us to understand the masculinity around this that attracted these young men. This was a young Asian man, young Asian, young man. And so when I was talking to him, I did bring up, ICE and the deportations. He totally agreed. You know,
mhm.
these were terrible. And he agreed with some of the terrible points we're talking about today, the cruelty. And actually, when we talk about tying it back to the lottery, these are starting to become, are these going to become like normal things we're seeing, what happens to people. So it's just how we take care and have a safer world. But this is a trade-off for a peaceful community. We need to have this inner roundup of people to get rid of the bad people. And he talked about this a little bit. Here's going to be a Marine, but he was more conflicted as well. What an opportunity. Because when I said to him, what if someone came into your house and took your grandma? It's a whole different story. He doesn't think that's going to happen to him, because what he sees is more Latino people. And he doesn't kind of identify his family with what's happening. And I think just in the sense, gathering the stones, we talk about people are gathering these stones, right? All these people gathered stones and they don't realize it. They're going to have to throw it at the people they love. And that's going to be a hard hell day for them because this is what happens in society that decides this is normal. There's mass deportation, ICE raids, right? People detained without due process, families separated. That's happening now. We've accepted it. We have the stones, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
true, right?
Yeah, we really do have the stones, and interestingly
It's
enough,
true.
in the lottery, as a children, I mean, this is really how you think about these
Right.
rituals and how you raise your children, to hate other people or to think
Right.
other people are less than or whatever, but in this case, in the lottery, the children are gathering stones, they have their little piles, and they're so excited about the stones,
Exactly.
and so interestingly enough, the woman who is selected in the lottery, her children are picking up the stones. And so this is why the book is so cruel about in terms of how people think
Make it
about things in
personal.
life and what's important to them. And so I think unfortunately it is where we're living today.
Yes.
I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic that we can bring back some decorum, that we can bring back some civility, that we can bring back some that these people can go back and get in the closet where they were. I am horrified that people are wearing their hoods out loud and
Yeah.
proud, and so I do think that there will be an opportunity for them to, have to go back in the corner again, but it will be because more people speak out and make it unacceptable.
And like Mark Elias talked about this too, taking it down to a simple level of like, don't expect these Republicans like in the Senate to even come. They're going to hide behind the Democrats and the filibuster. Don't. And it's sad because all those House Democrats don't have the courage to really talk about the honesty, what's in that bill and how it's going to hurt people. You got to remember, we got to call them out. They don't really give a shit, right? And I think in the end, when they're also watching what's happening to people and families, and we just saw the article drop about it was in the paper yesterday, front page, how much money is going in to set up these deep concentration camps around the country. Again, folks, we are doing it in real time, right? And these Americans are really thinking it doesn't affect me that, these people really shouldn't have come. And this young man out of the Marine, we talked about that. I had to explain to him a lot of these kids do not have historical context. Okay. They never read the lottery like I did. They didn't read literature. They don't have a background it's unbelievable. Without that background, they're operating in time thinking, oh, they have been invaded. Why are all these people here? So they really are looking at it that we need to return this law and that's the law, and that's always what they say, "Well, that's the law, isn't it?" Until the moral machinery kinda eats you up, right? And that's how Jim Crow operated, that's how the Japanese internment happened, that's how McCarthyism, thrived, and the Muslim ban passed, and the children ended up in cages, right? The cruelty became acceptable because it's legalized, it's procedural, it happens to them, not us. It's wrapped in language like security, tradition, law and order. That is the ritual. That's the same ritual in the lottery. It's the same idea in that book, right? I'll just wrap it up there like a bow on it before it's too late, though. So what we can do some stuff about it. So we don't want to end on that bad. Look, the moment before it's too late. What happened in the book though? Was there a time in that inflection?
No, the book ends with, that's what happens. They are gathering and they are starting to throw the stones, and so it is supposed to make you really think about
Yeah.
where you are, and the good news is it's wonderful. It's probably a great story for someone to use in a book club because there's so many things that you can correlate it to, but there is supposed to be a lesson in it, And so the lesson is for us to understand that that's not how we want to live life. We have to think about life as fairness and
Right.
what's good for everyone. And so that's the beauty of the story is that it is supposed to compel people to
Yes.
think about the life that we live and how we want to live on this
And
earth.
yeah, and I think when it like, again, I love the idea of I can picture the gathering of stones, and we'll play with that a little bit later when we talk about it, but and, tying it to the SAVE Act and just wrap a bow on it, as I say, and when just like the book The Lottery, you normalize something through ritual and acceptance of it, right? But if you normalize like stripping away rights from immigrants, limiting due process, expanding federal enforcement and power, centralizing control over your voter rolls, then guess what? You normalize the idea that your rights are conditional. And conditional rights, right, are at the beating heart of the lottery. So that is when we have to really think about that in such larger terms of what people don't even see what's happening. So when we start to argue about these things, we have to be careful that we just don't get into the weeds, but we really have to show what's really happening when this is going to be coming up with our neighbors about those rights and not about do you need a photo ID, right?
That is right. I think it is a good place to end.
Yeah, I love it. And so I'm so glad seeing everybody in the room. I know it's a rainy night. We love having you here with us. We love to get together and just kind of share our thoughts. Two regular gals just shooting the shit, as I say, drinking some tea. It's a good tea night. So we hope you guys will continue to join us and spread the word, subscribe, share our work. I'm just going to say that Fennell's work is phenomenal. When she writes during the week, it just helps me with so much insight. And then on Fridays, this Friday, we have the Friday Power Lunch. You can tune in live or you can watch it. So with that, go eat, go make dinner. Go make
I'm
your,
gonna go make dinner. I'm
hey,
gonna go make dinner.
you see. Love you,
Good
friend.
night, everybody. Thank you guys for joining.
Well, enjoy
Night.
the theater. Bye bye.